This is a special report from ABC News Digital.
Hello, I'm Ty Hernandez in New York, and this is an ABC News Digital special report. Standing by his man on camera, an unusual scene today. President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden's closed-doors lunch made public. Those doors were open. It comes a day after excerpts from former Defense Secretary Bob Gates' memoir were released. Gates ripping into Biden, saying his career had been riddled with foreign policy mistakes. For more on this, let's bring in ABC's Rick Klein in Washington. Rick, Biden is used to this attack, especially from Republicans, but let's take some of these quotes one by one here. Quote, Biden has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. How unprecedented is this type of commentary in the memoir, and what have the consequences been?
It's never happened before to have a defense secretary, a former defense secretary, during the presidency that he served under, come out and attack in such harshly and even personal at times terms. And that's what makes this sting. We have known about disagreements inside the White House. Even Joe Biden has talked about some of the areas where he would have proceeded differently than Secretary Gates and even President Obama. But to have Secretary Gates come out just a few years after serving under this president and say that Vice President Biden was so consistently wrong, that absolutely stings. And we're seeing it reverberate across Capitol Hill, where Republicans are saying, we've always been saying exactly that about Joe Biden. Democrats coming to his defense, including President Obama, who says that Joe Biden is a trusted voice on foreign policy and has often been right on the issues. This one absolutely hurts.
Of course, no accident that this normally closed-door meeting has been open to the press today. What else has the White House been doing to try to counter these attacks?
Well, as you mentioned, it's been bring a buddy to work day for President Obama. Typically, the president and the vice president have different schedules. Today, they have no less than 4 events that were put on the public schedule where we were told that President Obama and Vice President Biden will be doing these things side by side. That lunch is, of course, the biggest on the schedule. We've never seen pictures of that before, so a clear message there. We're also seeing statements come out from a number of White House officials testifying to Joe Biden's prestige and experience in foreign policy. He is a senator, was the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, has traveled across the world multiple times. Maybe an ironic twist, he was brought onto the Obama ticket because of a perceived lack of gravitas on foreign policy issues. He filled a hole for President Obama that President Obama has continued to rely on him on. He has at times, though, been a voice in the room who said, wait a second about what the military is saying. Be skeptical of their motivations. And that appears to be what got Secretary Gates a little bit upset, is that you saw Joe Biden whispering in the president's ear just off stage, talking about why you should be skeptical of the motivations of 4-star generals. That's the kind of thing that we now know that Secretary Gates is not a fan of.
Tell us more about Gates. Why did the president keep him on after taking office? It must have been fairly obvious or evident throughout his period of time that he remained in office that there was strife.
Gates was and is a Republican, but he's more on the independent side than anything else. He had served Democratic presidents going back to Jimmy Carter and was seen as more of a nonpartisan and apolitical figure more than anything else. And it was seen as a major gesture of goodwill in bridging the administrations. Typically, you find a Republican or two to put in your cabinet if you're a Democratic president, vice versa for a Republican president. But to do it for such a high-profile job was a statement. Also, remember where we were headed by the end of the Bush administration. Clearly, the wars weren't over, but they were winding down. It was a statement by President Obama to try to see some continuity in foreign policy, to try to urge the end of these and to end it on terms that would be amenable to the United States. So it wasn't to rush anything out of there. And I think it was something that got plaudits on the left, on the right as well, to see that President Obama would lean on someone who had been appointed by President Bush to lead the war efforts. He was seen as an answer to Donald Rumsfeld, so that's part of the psychology around this as well. I think, though, it'll be a long time before you see any president cross party lines to name his defense secretary after a tell-all vote like this emerges.
Yeah, it seems that gesture was not entirely appreciated when all is said and done. Let's skip around a little bit and talk about Congress for a moment, because Gates had plenty to say in this memoir about the vice president, Congress, and the president. So we're going to go to another quote here about Congress. Quote, I saw most of Congress as uncivil, incompetent at fulfilling their basic constitutional responsibilities, micromanagerial, parochial, hypocritical, egotistical, thin-skinned, and prone to put self and re-election before country. I also bristled at what's become of congressional hearings where rude, insulting, belittling, bullying, and all too often personal attacks on witnesses by members of Congress violated nearly every norm of civil behavior. Why? Not that you can answer this, but this is shockingly harsh. Why so harsh?
A couple of thoughts. One is, tell me something I don't know about your judgment on Congress. The second is, I wish he had named names, because you'd love to hear who he thought particularly were this parochial. The third thought I have is, this is kind of the thought bubble when you see administration officials at that witness table being pilloried by members of Congress who have very parochial re-election interests in mind. You wonder what they're really thinking about the people on the other side of the table, up at the front of the room. This is it. And I think it is that lack of understanding or lack of respect for each other that colors so many of these hearings that have become televised shows more than anything else. You have a handful of members who, I'm sure even Secretary Gates would say, are interested in the policy, want to do right by everyone else, but they are television events by and large, and I think he was calling that out for the idiocy, the hypocrisy, the inanity of so many of these hearings.
But when you deal with that level of visceral criticism, I mean, aren't you getting down and dirty with the people that you're criticizing?
Yeah, he said that he had half a mind at some of these hearings to just get up and say, I quit. I'm not going to go along with this anyway. Of course, he didn't do that. That would have been quite a moment that we'd be talking about for a long time. He went through the ritual. And in fact, he played the role that he is expected to play. I can't remember a single instance of him even losing his temper, unlike some other Obama administration officials who have famously done so repeatedly in front of Congress. So he sat there, he took his lumps, he realized what the show was, as many a secretary before and since have done. But you're right. To leave this, I think he has a bitterness around Washington, around the process, that just bubbles through this narrative. It's not just in the frustration about the politics being played inside the White House or on Capitol Hill. It's everything about the system that ground him down, and it's just an indication of why he wanted to get out when he did midway through the first Obama term. There's
certainly been lots of reaction, and some more muted than you might think. We have Speaker of the House John Boehner responding today. Let's listen to that.
He's entitled to his comments under the First Amendment, just like anyone else.
Okay, so in the book, Gates also recalls a meeting in March of 2011 during which President Obama expressed his frustration over the lack of progress in Afghanistan. He wrote, quote, "As I sat there, I thought the president doesn't trust his commander, can't stand Karzai, doesn't believe in his own strategy, and doesn't consider the war to be his. For him, it's all about getting out." Did the president's action bear out that description, or did the president's actions bear out that description?
Yes and no. President Obama took some politically unpopular things. In fact, as Gates recalls, even the minority opinion in that room, despite the objections of his vice president, to put more troops into Afghanistan before he started the withdrawal, for instance. So he has taken steps that at times cut a bit against this portrayal by Secretary Gates. And in fact, Gates hedges his descriptions in the book. He talks about the president's leadership, his listening skills. He likens him to George W. Bush in a lot of ways, some similarities in their personality. Clearly, President Obama did not like inheriting these two wars, saw it as much of his mission to get out of them. But the ultimate charge that Secretary Gates might have leveled about political expediency taking over national security, he doesn't quite go there with President Obama. And I think ultimately you come away with the perception of some respect that Secretary Gates maintains for President Obama. So he pulls a bit of a punch on that. Unlike his portrayal of Vice President Biden, there are some flattering elements of what he has to say about his former boss, the president.
Okay, where does Gates go from here? Obviously, he's a man that everyone wants to talk to now that we have these excerpts, and people, want to ask some follow-ups to some of the points been made here.
He goes on book tour, and he is selling a book, and that's something the White House, even in choosing not to respond with any kind of a blast, they let it be known that they see this as part of a book-selling expedition. They wished him well. He is recovering from a broken neck, as a matter of fact. He's still going to go out on tour. He's going to be everywhere over the next week or two on media appearances, on talk shows, on late-night comedy, as well as news programs. He's going to be a lot of places, and I think every time the Obama administration, and particularly Biden aides, see it, they're going to have to cringe just a little bit.
All right. ABC News political director Rick Klein, thank you very much for breaking this all down from us. The latest on the fallout from the scathing memoir from the former defense secretary. Stay right here at abcnews.com. This has been an ABC News Digital Special Report. I'm Ty Hernandez in New York.